headset. Great. All right,
Sounds good.
check 1 2. Boo 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 boo. Yeah, hold on.
Elvis was a hero to us.
Yeah, All right. So hopefully the part that I just said, but I said under a shitty microphone.
Mm-hmm.
Apologies for the audio last week, folks. Happens. Fuck you. You're not paying me. Okay.
Uh,
Um.
oh, by the way, did you like the logo? How dope
Um.
was that? You
I have.
didn't like it. Okay, never
No, no,
mind.
no, no, no.
Hmm.
I didn't pay much attention to it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Good segue coming, just like I didn't pay a lot of attention to this album. So, Prince, why don't you tell us, folks, what we're going to be talking about this week on.
Today we're going to be talking about one of the most influential bands in rap history and one of the most influential albums in rap history, and that would be um, the group Public Enemy. And it takes a nation of millions to hold us back.
Bass! How low can you go?
Can you go?
Right. That's about the.
Right, an absolute classic.
That's how you want to start an album with just bass. How low can you go? You're right. It takes a nation to hold us back is the epitome of rap narcissism, to the point that you start the album basically building up to saying, "Okay, everybody, Public Enemy is going to be coming out. Def Jam tour. You all ready to see Public Enemy?" And then the hype man comes on stage.
That would be with clock with clock around.
By the way, by the
Not
way,
a fan.
I there were two types of black people in the late '80s. One that sold African medallions, and ones that bought them. I worked out the deal with the Chinese. I'm just saying.
Uh,
I'm just, I'm just saying. Um, the it is not
you
as
know,
good as it is not
okay.
as
Let
good.
me just stop you right now. Let me just stop you before you start. Okay. Let's just let's just get a couple of things clear about the importance of Public Enemy in the history of rap music, in the history of sound, the way that album sounded, the production, literally everything about that album changed the face of music. Next to Eric B. and Rakim's um, album, that's it. That's
So
the that's
so
the that
so
changed the game.
what you need to do is stop talking about Eric B. and Rakim and get that out of your mouth.
Oh my
So
goodness.
that's what you
Oh
need to
my
do, because
goodness.
we are not at the caliber of a, say, Joe Budden podcast. We
Oh,
are not.
well, yeah, I guess you're right.
We're not
Okay,
at the
maybe you're right.
caliber of a Brilliant Idiots by with Charlemagne the God and Andrew Schultze. Schultze,
You're right.
baby, I see you.
You're right.
We're
My
not.
bad.
We're not at the Reed caliber, so we can't talk
I love
about
the root, by the way.
albums like David Bowie's, Let's Dance, and we can't talk about Michael Jackson's Thriller. And we can't talk about Born in the USA, and we can't talk about Like a Virgin or Purple Rain. You won't hear that here, because we frankly we not at that level.
Right.
So
You
we
leave the
can't talk
superstar
about
for the
Paid in
superstar.
Full,
Right.
right? We can't talk about that. So you really need to adjust how you're thinking about Public Enemy and the impact that Public Enemy had. I'm going to tell you in the next 45 minutes, I am going to deeply explain to you how it takes a nation, how it takes a nation is nothing but a shameless rip from established artists, from old Public Enemy, How many times they gonna pimp that Flavor Flav played the beat himself routine? Come on, right? Is a shameless rip from every Coltrane album that ever existed, including and everything from early Kool and the Gang. And I'm not talking about Kool and the Gang. She's fresh, fresh. I'm not talking about when JT joined the band. I'm talking about Kool and the Gang when it was Jungle Boogie kind of right. That's and then everything else was ripped from the headlines, whether it be ripped from the headlines from the perspective of um, oh, I'm going to write an album while New York City is now coming to grips with what Bernie Getz did, and Bernie Getz got off. By the way, that was
So
the
wait a
year that
minute.
they wrote that. That was the year that
Right.
they wrote that.
So
So
you so you think making music that is relevant to the times, that is in the moment, is not important, is not a thing to do?
what I'm saying
Is
is
that
that
what you're
it takes
saying?
a
I want to make
nation.
sure the audience understands where where you're at, where you're coming from here.
What I'm saying is that it takes a nation is opportunistic. Now, Prince, if you want to have a conversation about opportunistic albums, we can continue to talk like we did last week about George Michael's faith. Opportunistic, had to be there at the right time. If you want to talk about stealing, we can talk about Billy Joel's and his entire gentrification of everything that happened in the 50s, 60s, and
Right.
70s, right?
Mm.
If you want to talk about just plain abusing the public, we can talk about the police and synchronicity, right? If we can talk about getting back and trying to represent something that is a little different than what you may be, we can talk about Bobby Brown's My Prerogative. But what we're not going to do is give this album any more credence than what it needs. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, if you have to choose one seminal album from the 80s to listen to, it should be something from Eric B. and Rakim. If you want something that's a little bit more pop flavor and pop appeal, then you can do LL Cool J. If you want to talk seminal, then we talk about Run DMC. But what we're not going to do is sit here and look at guys with a Kai 880s or whatever the hell they used, and Sonic samplers and ASR 10s and MPCs and SBC 2000s and every other beat machine, and we're going to claim that these guys changed the game, because they didn't.
Okay.
Now,
That was a very interesting speech. Completely, of course, completely wrong.
I,
But that
that,
that was
that's fair.
that was interesting. But Hank Shockley, one of the Bomb Squad, I think that's what they call themselves. You know,
More importantly, Eric Shockley's older brother, but okay.
whatever,
Okay, I'm
whatever.
just going to say, if
The
you're going to say
sound,
Hank, if you're going to say Hank, then you better say Eric.
right? Well, I mean, they're
Or you
brothers.
could just
Okay,
talk them about, you can say that they're the bomb squad.
right. That's and I did say that. I did say Bomb
Right,
Squad.
right.
You
Okay,
know,
okay.
they
No, okay.
created a sound,
Oh, okay.
right? I mean, let's be honest. Because the first Public Enemy album, the album before this one, sounds not much like the one we're talking about today.
Right.
It's He created a wall of sound that is, with so much stuff happening, it was just amazing to listen to. It was amazing to listen to. And of course he was able to use samples. Of course, you couldn't even make that album today with all the sample clearances that would be needed. It was
Right. Or you could be like Def Jam and Public Enemy, say, fuck it, why clear the samples? After all, maybe it was someone from Public Enemy or Def Jam or maybe Chuck himself that said, oh, just because I sample your creation and I reverse it or I put a little filter at the end, it's no longer your creation. And you
that
want
sounds
to
about
know,
right.
and you want to know why the little Uzis of the world play everything pop, pop, pop. That's why everything is like it is, right? It was misguided. It was overblown. And while it could be as creative as Phil Spector and the Wall of Sound, you can't say there weren't new production techniques. What it was is that the Bomb
It was
Squad,
modern jazz, is what it was. But continue.
the Bomb Squad was an entirely separate group from Public Enemy,
Right?
and the Bomb Squad has songs on this album that should be by the Bomb Squad. Now, I'm not taking anything from Hank and Eric, right? Because Hank and Eric gave us Ice Cube at a time when Ice Cube left NWA and
Right.
he had nowhere to go, right? It
And
was
gave us one of Ice Cube's seminal albums, by the way. Right? Let's be honest. Let's be honest. That has to be one of Ice Cube's best albums, if not the best.
so. First of all, you shall not be talking about Ice Cube out of the realm of the Players Club and Friday, right?
Oh,
and
boy.
and Anaconda.
I will say this about Hank Shockley. My biggest problem with Hank Shockley is that he did bring us young black teenagers. I mean, yeah, which was those white guys who was the rap group that was basically, I found that whole thing very offensive and a big problem. And but he was able to come out from under that and still create some great music.
And gave you more Public Enemy.
Right.
No,
and
sorry.
Gave us more
Gave you Public Enemy and Anthrax doing a Public
was
Enemy
he involved in? I don't know if he was involved in the Anthrax deal.
Well, didn't matter because that's the only reason that anybody knows pieces of this album, because it appeared in Tony Hawk's Skateboarder from PlayStation 2 or something, and
Right.
and it was the song that they just bring it on, right, and because you were doing some gnarly flips, right, because you know what, Chuck wasn't above getting that paper right there. So I'm just saying. But you know what, Prince? Let's prove it to me. So let's go down the album. It Takes a
Okay.
Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, released in 1988 on Def Jam. Def Jam at the time known for Run DMC, Beastie Boys, Great White Hope, and LL Cool J.
LL Cool J.
We just need a way to pay for Run DMC and the Beastie Boys, right? So that was if you really want to talk about the important hip hop labels at the time, we'd talk about Delicious Vinyl, or we would talk about Profile Records, or we were talking about one of those guys. But fine, we can talk about Def Jam. By the way, this is probably around the time that Russell Simmons was running around forcing yoga instructors to do things that he's now in Bali saying that he's not doing. But I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there.
Oh, that was mean.
Yeah.
But okay.
All right, let's talk about this album. Countdown to Armageddon, first track, right?
That's
By the
right.
way, this album, much like what is the growing trend in the 80s, this album suffers from the classic, you probably want to start it on side B, track 1, right? Instead of sequencing it the way that they want to sequence it. I think of all the podcasts we've done, I'm probably 5 for 5, that this is a trend that somebody needed to pay attention to.
That was
But-
the 80s, man.
Okay, right. The 80s was make them wait for it.
Right.
So let's
Right.
go.
You know.
Countdown to Armageddon. So, a live recording of a
Short.
show, probably in London, someplace, and not even a Public Enemy show, a Def Jam show, that you could hear the edits instead of saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready? Are you ready for Run DMC? Are you ready for LL Cool J? Are you ready for the Beastie Boys? Are you ready for Davy Dave? Are you ready for Houdini? And are you ready for Public?" All that shit is edited to "Are you ready for Public Enemy?" And then it's the classic.
What a
air horn.
great way to open an album, because it gives you a sense of immediacy. You know, it's like, oh, whoa, oh, we're here for the show. We're here for the show. You know, it's great, brilliant.
I think
You know?
the air horns were a little much. I think the air
I mean,
horns were a little much. I think absolutely The air horns were a little much because the generation listening to it didn't remember the fallout shelter signs in their elementary school, right? So
The
what the fuck? What the fuck kind of sound is that? Oh, that's an air horn. An air what? Yeah, you don't remember
Joe
1945's
Budden
London.
wouldn't be doing his air horns today if it wasn't for Public Enemy. Public Enemy bringing the air horns to rap consciousness. I just want to say that, but
So
continue.
you need to watch your mouth about Joe Budden,
All right, I know.
right? Joe Budden, adult education, is a friend of the show.
We love you. We
We
love
love
you,
you.
Joe.
By the way, this segment of the Adult Education Podcast brought to you by the Joe Budden Podcast with Rory and Maul and Parks, right? Coming to a city near you. Joe,
Right.
give us some love. Sorry. All right. So we've got the air horns, we've got the crowd, we've got some anticipation. What's noticeably missing from that track is that there's no audience sound.
You're
It's
right.
all the
Oh
mic.
yeah.
There's no audience sound, right? So there's no audience feedback. There's no visceral reaction. There's nothing that tells you that, hey, these guys last year, they put out an album with Rebel Without a Pause, which is, by the way, we refuse to admit Rebel Without a Pause actually changed hip hop. That was when we started getting into the funky drummer James Brown. That album sold 300,000 copies and nobody ever knew it. It changed hip hop, right? It was so incredibly seminal, right? Right, Rebel Without a Pause. That single was so
I'm listening.
incredibly seminal that these guys decided to just go back. The day that this album was dropping, they were back in the studio recording. The day that their previous album, Yo Bum Rush the Show with Rebel Without a Pause, the day that that was dropping, these guys were in the studio recording this album, right? And so
Right.
that again, all signs on this album point to a gentle manipulation and a gentle propaganda campaign to take advantage of everything that was happening in the news. Now, first of all, Chuck D is a legend in hip hop, and I will never take anything away from Chuck D. But more than anything, Chuck D, the Shockleys, even Flavor Flav, everybody, and Def Jam, and of course you've got Russell and you've got Rick Rubin. Everybody involved in this project absolutely understood the shtick, the shtick of black nationalism in
They were trying to
1988.
do. They were trying to be the Clash. They were trying to create a black Clash. That's that. I think I would say that is what they were going for.
The problem is that
You know.
the
But then
prob-
Flavor Flav got in
the
it.
problem is that if you want Black Clash, then go listen to X Clan, right? And X Clan will give it to you how because nothing is better than listening
But they
to.
weren't around then.
Right, well,
But
no,
go ahead.
I think X Clan was around it. No, maybe a little later, but
yeah, it was a
hey,
little
listen,
later.
listen, nothing better than black Judeo Christians standing on a milk carton with nose rings and saying, "To the east, my brother, to the east, to the east, my brother, to the east." You know what I'm saying?
But that's a classic song, though.
That's okay. There you go.
Oh.
By the way, our podcast, which has been formerly known as Two Black Guys Talking About a Whole Bunch of White Stuff, we have now jumped the shark, and I think we may need to give a second for all of the listeners out there that are putting on their kufis and their berets and are getting Obama 3X kind of bumper stickers. So if there's something that we can that we can do, but that's my problem with Countdown to Armageddon, right? It's pretentious, and I'm okay going into a pretentious album. But if it's a pretentious album, then tell me that you want me to be the audience. Because when I listened to this album, and at the time when I listened to the album, I was a third party. The album was in third person. And so all of a sudden, I'm listening to the album. Even when you look at the album cover, right? It's them looking at you, but it's not really them looking at you. It's them looking at someone else because they're in a quasi jail cell, and Chuck is looking, and that's really cool. By the way, I think by this time all those guys were college graduates and had studied philosophy and the works of great, and nothing absolutely wrong with that. But then when the first thing you want me to do is you're going to put on air horns to get my attention, and then you want me to participate in an obvious bad DAT recording, the first thing I think about is, wow, what the fuck is production going to be like on this album?
Let's move on to song two.
Okay, let's move on. Bring the noise, right? Bring the noise. By the way, the the best introduction by a hype man, right? Yo, Chuck, man.
Yo, Chuck!
Right? It's
Bye!
right. Bum rushed the show. I had no idea who anybody's name was. All of a sudden, there's a guy named Chuck.
Right, you say that as if that's a bad thing.
Right? No. The only but honestly, in 1988, the only Chuck we knew was what Lucy called Charlie Brown when she was talking to him, and somehow the 5-year-old brain in my head had to somehow relate things like Charles to Chuck. Oh, okay. So Larry to Lawrence or Dick to Richard. Charles to Chuck, right? So all of a sudden I have this voice, right, that is now just sounding very anal. I don't know what he is. I don't know what that means. All this, but it's not even Chuck. Why don't you just tell me? It's your record. I bought it. But Flava Flav, I'm gonna leave that name alone and go there because anytime that you can tell me this is a classic album, I will point you to your VH1 archives to 4 seasons of The Flavor of Love, and I will let you know how that nailed it. And then I will also tell you that somehow
I'm a big fan. I mean, I've been a big fan of Public Enemy my whole life.
Okay.
But one of the things you should know that the people listening should know about Public Enemy, that when the band was originally put together, how Def Jam did not want Flava Flav in the group. They insisted that Chuck get rid of this dude. He doesn't fit what y'all are talking about. He's a fucking clown and all this. And to show his brilliance, Chuck D's brilliance, he insisted that Flava Flav not only stay in the group, but have a, big part in what Public Enemy was. I mean, he was smart enough to realize that there has to be some type of relief when you're coming at people very hard. You have to give them something to laugh at, a way to get to release their anger in a safe way. I think it shows Chuck D's brilliance, and that he was pretty much smarter than everybody else. But continue.
So one, I think you like Public Enemy for the same reason that you think Kamala Harris has a chance.
Now that is insulting.
I'm gonna let you take that where it's at, right? By the way, I see all the people listening to this podcast. That's the comment that they're gonna respond to.
Oh yeah, yes.
That's the. First of all, you got no business talking about Kamala Harris on this podcast. Second of all, Charlemagne the God is really where it's at. Y'all want to do podcasts. Third of all, Public Enemy. Well, I'm sorry, who is Public Enemy? Right. So,
Right.
Bring the Noise was an amazing song. It starts off really, really classic. The cadence is there. The baritone of Chuck D's voice is there. The authority. It's almost a caricature of how we look at hip hop, right? You go to any white guy that has no idea about hip hop, and you go, "Hey, I want you to spit 4 bars for me," and they go, "Hip hop." Hippity hop hop, hip hop. That's what they do, right?
Right. They try to sound like
they're trying to sound like Chuck D. So I'll definitely give it right, because nobody would ever sound like
Sound like Chuck.
Right. Nobody's ever gonna be like the the whole Eric B, Rakim kind of, that kind of sip the juice. I got enough to go around. They ain't gonna do all of that, right? But they're gonna hippity hoppity hippity, right? It's that bass, it's caricature, and I think it works. And I think it works for the first. I think it works up to the first verse, um, and I like the classic Terminator X doing the scratching that you've come to understand and respect from Jam Master Jay. I think what's interesting is that at the time you had Jam Master Jay and you had LL Cool J's uh, uh, his DJ escapes
Yeah.
me. Um,
What was his name?
and, and,
Cut
and,
Creator. Cut Creator.
yeah, and Cup Creator, yeah. And at that time, the magic of the turntable cut was taking that one word and then scratching out that one word and good,
Right.
with Nile Rodgers and Good Times. Now Terminator X turns this into the turntablism is not scratching out a word and bringing back a word and showing the skills of how to bring back that word in time and all of the sounds around it, right? Because if you remember, when uh, 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 when Grandmaster Flash and all of them was scratching, the actual record scratching was not what you heard. You just heard when they released it that good, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And now what you have is a so
Right.
you
You can
have
hear
that,
it.
right? And so now you're now having your turntablist create a sonic landscape, which is cool. The problem is that, and this is the problem that repeatedly happens to the album. You have to ask yourself: is this something that the Shockley brothers are doing to fill the landscape, that wall of sound, or is it something that they're doing to push how great a DJ or a turntablist Terminator X is, or what is it? The reason why that's important is because Bring the Noise is the reason for Linkin Park. Bring the Noise is the reason for Fred Durst and
Right.
and I forget the
Hmm.
name, and every other
Yeah. That
band that
rock
now had a
rock
term.
rap
Yeah,
deal, whatever they call that.
exactly. New metal, right? Is what
Yeah.
what you could find
Yeah.
it under. And Bring the Noise is that reason for it because the whole idea of sampling a word and cutting up that word, it now became this was the filler in the gaps. And that's what I love about Bring the Noise, but that's what I don't like about Bring the Noise because Bring the Noise is why have a DJ? You have these amazing producers that are obviously triggering shit like this, but you want to tell me that the DJ is doing it. So now the DJ is just part of the live show, but you have the DJ named Terminator X, and now you're doing all the rest of the stuff. But that's my
Isn't it
whole thing about
amazing?
that.
We're already on the second song, and they've already created a whole nother genre of music. Wow. Go ahead. Continue.
So
Isn't this album isn't
Chuck
this album
D
great?
and his black nationalism by the second song on what you call his seminal album has opened the lane up for every other white band and a whole phenomenon from guys that scream and guys that are now guys that now legitimately get themselves to call themselves part of a band to white girls that play piano that sound really well, and then all of a sudden you put a turntable to it and give them a great name like Everessence, and then all the girls were
There's a whole
okay.
thing
So
of
yes,
white
Chuck
guys
D
wearing
is responsible for white boys in skater outfits and Vans,
wearing
right?
Public Enemy shirts.
Wearing a Public Enemy shirt, a whole culture that he's not getting paid on, right? It reminds me of that black guy that invented rubber bands. How's that working out for that family right there?
Uh, I don't like this Chuck disrespect. I really don't.
But that
I'm,
that's
I'm not a fan of it.
that's that's
I
fine.
am not a
That's
fan of
that's
it.
that is fine. let's
But
move on to the next
yeah,
song.
let's move.
Don't believe the hype.
Another classic.
That
Ugh,
is horribly dated.
well, of course.
Horribly dated.
Wow.
Horribly dated. So, Biggie Small says, the more I smoke, the smaller the Philly gets. First of all, you're going to remember that. You just remember that. You just remember that. I mean, it doesn't matter. It just, you just remember that, Um, Jay-Z's got a million and one lines and 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one. And you get that. Um, you got LL Cool J talking about "Mama said knock you out," and you remember those lines. Hell, you remember Eric B
You
and
don't
Rakim
think
when they
people
say
remember? Don't remember? Don't believe the hype?
they remember
That's
flavor.
a
They
that's
remember.
part of the culture.
They remember
Everyone knows
Flavor
what that
Flav
means.
saying, "Don't, don't,
don't don't
don't,
believe
don't,
right.
don't believe the hype." Right?
Don't
Right.
believe the hype.
And nobody ever quotes any lyrics from that. So, in contrast to the album, right, this is the story that you always hear about someone creating a great body of music and some A&R guy at Def Jam, which is supposed to be the renegade of record labels, and we don't need no damn stinking singles, right? Dare I say, at the same time, you have NWA out, and NWA doing things without singles, right? But Def Jam needs a single, right? So they create a song which has nothing, no sonic semblance, no relationship to anything else on this album, and they choose that as the single.
Great song for the times. It was it was a great song and a seminal piece of work.
So
I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna leave it there.
Chuck D is telling us that we can't trust the media. I get it. I get it.
Right. Yeah, and that was a long time ago.
That's right.
You
I
know,
get it.
and that was back in the '80s. That was back in the '80s, and it makes it, and it's still relevant today. Amazing.
Beds
You
Are
know,
Burning did the same
amazing.
thing, but I'm okay with that.
Wait, I'm sorry. Who?
Beds Are Burning did the same thing, but Midnight Oil, that seminal
Hey.
album, did the same thing. Hell, your beloved Pet Shop Boys said that we shouldn't trust West End girls. And that's interesting, right? But
Right.
Chuck D said, don't believe the hype, and all of a sudden you're not picking up the New York Daily News anymore. Fuck out of here with that. Okay, let's move. Cold Lamping with Flavor.
Cold Lemon with Flavor. This was to introduce Flavor Flav to people because everyone had to be thinking, what is this clown doing in this group? What is his purpose? So let's wrap that up early on in this album. He's the flavor, and the whole song is just him, talking about various flavors and their importance.
So Flavor Flav would go on to make possibly the best and most respected and most relevant song from Public Enemy. Nobody else was
Right.
on it, right?
Exactly.
911
That's
is
true.
a joke,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
I called 911 a long time ago. Don't you see how late they be acting? By the way, everybody knows the lyrics to that song.
You're right.
Everybody
You're right.
knows the lyrics to that song. Great song, different decade, so we won't be going too much into that.
All
Right?
right.
But before he did 911 as a joke, he did Cold Lampin'. By the way, you want to blame Chuck for something, blame Chuck for getting rid of the G in all of these fucking people's names.
Why you want to blame Chuck for that?
Give-
Why you want to blame
give
Chuck for that?
giving these niggas the right to use an apostrophe wherever they felt fit, right? Apostrophe brings together two words, or takes a word and creates a verb out of it. And if you give it an apostrophe and you put an ing behind it, no, we're gonna put an in and drop off the G, and then put an apostrophe to do something, and then fuck it, we're just gonna make up a word. We're gonna call it lamping. Okay, I'll tell you that this is a great song, Prince,
course.
if you tell me what does lamping mean.
I'm not going to say that it's a. I think it's a, it's a song for its time. So it's not a, no, it's not great, but like I said, it was to introduce Flavor Flav. You know, that's every what Chuck D has done, what he has done in this album, and what he had did for the group. He introduced you to each character that in this party, in this group. He's going to introduce you to everybody. It's Flavor Flav's time to introduce him. The next song, he's going to introduce somebody else important to the group. That is what he did. And that's, how can you not like that? How can you not respect that? It's a group, but everybody gets their space and their time to say something.
So,
I mean, it's not.
so Prince, I'm
Yes,
gonna let you talk about Terminator because I want to leave Cold Lamping alone, but I'm gonna let you talk about Terminator X to the Edge of Panic. I'm looking at it right because I just knew it was the Terminator X song and it sampled Flash Gordon, right? You're
Right.
gonna do that, and I think the S1Ws are at my door, so I'm gonna pause my video for a moment. You can't see me, but you see a
Right.
really cool comic character. Please tell us about Terminator X to the Edge of Panic, and tell me why it's a 4 minute and 31 second song. You keep
The
talking,
reason
buddy.
the reason the song is so long and so great is because it gave Terminator X the chance to display his cutting abilities. It's classic, maybe a stretch, but as I said before, as Chuck D was putting together this group, he made sure that everybody had a chance to shine, and this was his chance for Terminator X to shine. Now, I'm sure most of the people listening to this has never seen Terminator X, never seen him or anything like that. But he's this tall, really tall black guy. He always wore sunglasses, so you couldn't see his face, you couldn't see his eyes, and all that stuff. He looked very, what's the right word? He looked not disconcerting. I don't know. He made you look a little nervous. He looked like he was a serious motherfucker. He looked like a very serious guy, and then having the X in the name, Terminator X, is like, whoa, this is not a dude to fuck with. And this song displayed his abilities and why he was who he was. So yeah, it's a great testimonial to him. By the way, now he owns a emu farm. Seriously. Seriously, I'm dead serious. I think it's in North Carolina. Yeah.
Um, I apologize for stepping away for a moment. We have a special guest
Oh.
that
Okay.
stopped on by that liked to give his 2 cents about the album. It is my flavor doll.
Who has a flavor doll?
Not to be confused with my Chuck D doll.
Now we talking English. Okay.
Yo, Chuck, man. Okay, so by the way, this segment of the podcast is brought to you by the original Pelly Pelly jeans, the
Hey.
ones that covered the bottom of your kicks,
Right.
The ones like Flavor Flav had, and also, as you can see, Flavor Flav with the house arrest ankle bracelet. Okay,
That is so realistic.
that's down to the clock, Prince. Look at the
Wow. Classic, man.
right. Don't ask why I have a Flavor Flav doll.
I'm sure God will forgive you for that.
Um,
You know?
I'm sure that I'm going to get a whole bunch of questions during the in the
Yes.
comment
Yes,
section
on the letter
of
segment,
where
right.
they can buy a Chuck D doll. And by the way, this does not look anything like Chuck D. This
I
is
know.
just an angry black man with a baseball cap and a Caesar. But it is but it is Chuck D because it's got the big leather jacket and the Def Jam, and
Mhm.
it's got the cool kicks, and he's yeah, okay, he's got the jeans and everything else like that. So, all right, playing with my toys. Terminator X has an emu farm in North Carolina.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about Terminator X and the track To the Edge of Panic is that you would want a track where you got the impression that Terminator X was front and center, and no, it is the Shockley boys that are front and center of everything on this track. And
Well, okay.
again, do I have samples? Do I actually have samples of do I have Terminator X playing what he needs to play, or as you can see in my other MPC 2000 prop, right? You can scratch as good as I can hit the sample. Okay, let's go on, right? Louder than a bomb.
I think that's the only song that Terminator X ever got writing credit on for Public Enemy.
No, I think he got one. Remember, Terminator X did the song about the Jeeps.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he had actually a great single off that album. Um, hold on, let's
I'm trying to think.
so we can actually do a search for it. Terminator X, and it is the Terminator X. The album was called um, Terminator X in the Valley
Valley
of the Jeep
Beats, right?
Beats, right? And right, and all he did was the real good songs are the ones that he had Chuck D and like Sister Soldier on. So
Good old
I'll leave it
Soldier.
right. So
Uh,
but shit, a DJ got a whole deal over that. That hadn't happened since D Nice, So
all right.
you
What
know,
that tells you about the power of Public Enemy, man.
it tells you about the power of Public Enemy. Let's go on to the next song, Prince. Um, and the next song is Mind Terrorist, another
All right. That
Shockley
was
brothers. Let's continue to push our agenda, and let's see if we can get some Priority Records artists to record uh, with us. Ice Cube is on Priority. I'm sorry. So it's a big walking target. So without listening to a Mind Terrorist, right? And I've got to keep looking over to see what the name of that song is, right? But without looking over to Mind Terrorist, can you even describe what that song is about, Prince?
no, but I do know that it was very short. I know that it wasn't a long song, and it was basically a lot of Shockley sounds. But that's what public. I mean, you look at this. You can't look at this album as a series of singles. You have to look at it as a project and as basically, I don't want to say an event, even though it's borderline event music, borderline revolutionary music,
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
borderline.
whoa, whoa, whoa.
Don't
Yo,
don't.
you're getting real heavy with that revolutionary word. You're getting real heavy with that revolutionary word.
I mean, they had something
I
to say,
thought you were a
and
Cory
they
Booker guy, and you wanted just peace and love, peace and love, peace and love. Okay.
this as I continue to say, Chuck D went through the process of making sure everybody had their places to shine, and you can't look at this as the everybody is involved in this album. This is not the Shockley brothers are just as much a part of the group. The Bomb Squad is just as much a part of the group as Chuck D is, or Flavor Flav is, or Terminator X is, and he's given everybody their space, their room to breathe, and that's and he should be applauded for that, as opposed to just saying, "Oh well, that song sucks." Well, dude, it's not about the song sucking. It's about the entire project. Let's look at
Or
the big picture.
Chuck could say, "Let me give It Takes a Nation a year to breathe in the audience and not step on my own feet and not try to put filler on an album and give us something like Fear of a Black Planet," which, by the way, is exactly what he did. Fear of a Black Planet took another 3 years to get released, right? And
That was
that's
a great album, by
exactly.
the way.
Sorry?
That's my. That was a great album, by the way.
That's an amazing album. Again, wrong decade, right? And
Right.
I
Yeah.
will give you all of the accolades of this album to that album for a variety of reasons. This album, again, when I look at Mind Terrorist, louder than a bomb, louder than a bomb, even can I get a witness, right? From my perspective, I'm just talking about three songs that just add nothing to the album.
Let me say this, okay? As opposed to let's com as opposed to George Michael, okay?
Here we go.
I know you may not see the, and just bear with me.
Oh,
All right.
I'm waiting for you to tie this one together.
Right. When George Michael Faith album, which everyone says is a classic album, which everyone says, had a whole bunch of hit songs and all that stuff. But the thing about that is once George Michael did that, he was done. He basically shot his wad. He was done. That was it. George Michael never made a relevant song afterwards. On the other hand, if you look at the progression of Chuck D, Public Enemy, you see every album they grew and got better. This was only their second album, but you could still see, if you look at their later work, you could see bits and pieces of it coming together starting here on this album, which is one of the reasons why this album becomes so much, so important in the lexicon of Public Enemy and what they were trying to do and what they eventually ended up saying.
Prince. We may have to agree to disagree here because
Yeah, you have the right to be wrong.
after Fear of a Black Planet, Public Enemy lost its relevance as Chuck D became more of a black spokesperson, which is exactly where he needed to be. But okay, tell me, what was the album after Fear of a Black Planet?
Something sick in your head.
Give me a song.
I don't know. There's a couple.
Tell me
albums.
one song after something off of Fear of a Black Planet. Tell me one song besides "Bring the Noise" 20 years later, right? Or "Bring the Noise" by Anthrax, right? Give me one song.
Let's see. Harder Than You Think. I really love that song. I don't know if you ever heard that. Why are you looking at me with that tone of voice? You never heard of Harder Than You Think?
Because I have my computer automatically wired to anything that you say Apple Music brings up, and Siri
Okay.
just gave me the big question mark, like, what the fuck are you talking about? so,
What Do You Think is a great record. I think it came out in like maybe 5 years ago.
the problem is that
2012, something.
Chuck D was a lecturer, right? And we needed that lecturer in 87 and 88. And then, Chuck D became a storyteller with Fear of a Black Planet, which is why that's so much of a better album. Here was really good, black nationalism and everything else like that. And by the way,
Saying black nationalism, but I wouldn't really call them what they were talking about black nationalism. I think they was just spitting some facts around. I mean, they had Professor Griff, the Nation of Islam guy, but I mean, I don't know if I would say they were spitting black nationalism. But proceed. I didn't mean to get you off course.
no, you're fine. It was definitely an agenda.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
it was definitely an agenda, and it was definitely an agenda with the. It was an agenda to suggest that, you know,
And it was an agenda that was completely different than anything else you heard.
yeah. But Prince, let me play
I
devil.
can't live it on my radio.
Let me play devil's advocate.
Adidas, then you
Let
had
me
Chuck
play
D
devil's advocate. After I
talking
finish
about,
reading,
speaking the truth.
yeah, but after I finish reading the autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley, I had some ideas about how what white people meant to me as well, right?
Uh,
The album comes off
the album
just
was
as the album comes off as somebody who's really, really, really pissed off that Malcolm X doesn't have a holiday. But he's kind
they
of got
did
a
write a song.
but he's
They
kind of
did.
got a boulevard up in where you are, right? He's kind of got a
Right.
boulevard,
Yes.
but
Yes.
it's not a real
Yes.
boulevard.
He has a street here.
Yeah, but it's not a
So
real street.
I don't know. It's a major street. It's pretty.
Wait,
Everybody
wait, wait,
knows
wait,
it.
wait, 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 wait. Hold on.
Malcolm
Back
X
up.
Boulevard is a.
Back up. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to Malcolm X Boulevard. I want you to
I
go to
pass
one of the
Malcolm X
I
Boulevard
want you to go
every
to one
day.
of the houses that are right there, right? I want you to go knock on a woman's door. I want you to
Mhm.
ask some woman, "Can you show me a piece of mail?" And I want that person's address to say 123 Malcolm X Boulevard. Because I'm going to tell you something. I've
It
checked
does.
my sources, and Amazon Prime does not deliver to Malcolm X Boulevard.
Uh,
Oof,
but that's part of and that's the kind of stuff that Chuck D and they were
at,
talking about.
at
You
the
know,
time, right? So they're enlightened. So let's go down to
we're on
show them
side
what you
two.
got. Show them what you got. Show show
Show 'em.
show them what you
Right.
got. Right. So again, if he's scratching it, it's cool. If he's even doing it on some type of a beat machine, that's cool. But one gets the idea that that Flavor Flav is sitting in a booth somewhere, making this character of himself, saying, "Show him, show him, show him, show him what you got." What do you think? How's that shit sound? That shit is boss, right? That's what you get the feeling, right? It just go ahead.
No, I'll save it until we get to the next song. It'll be more relevant then.
Fine. She watched Channel Zero. Amazing track.
Right, isn't it though?
Amazing track. Relevant, timely, continues to be just something that we talk about. More importantly, he's making a statement about women, and he's making a statement about the importance of women in our culture and how some women can be brainwashed in our culture. This is Chuck D taking that classic, you can get married and she needs to be half your age plus 13.
I
And
think it's 7.
right,
Oh, is
and,
it 13?
and
Yeah, I think
seven.
it's 7.
And by the way, I am no disrespect to any of the
Elijah Muhammad.
honorable. Well, I think that in movies that was portrayed as that was the glorious Elijah Muhammad. So, but and
Take
those
your
two
age,
things.
divide it in half, and
Right,
add
right.
7 to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was that quasi black misogyny, right? That quasi
Mhm.
that black duplicity that says we deserve to be treated better, but not them faggots. Right? That's where you have.
That's
That's right.
yeah, but
That is
that was the time.
Right.
So
That
was
is the you better treat our women and show some respect on the black woman's name, especially my 3 black babies mamas, right? That's where that's the whole fallacy of that. And I think Chuck starts off in not giving it to you so much on the nose, and so many of the problems that I have on this album are Chuck D giving it to you on the nose, right? Just being very, very very, very straightforward. And sometimes there's no problem with that. This is Chuck just, I think, saying some things in a way that we can understand, in a way that we feel comfortable with, and so I like this song. As a matter of fact, this is part of that. This is part of that the second half of the album. The I think it's the black side, they called it, right, instead of the back side, the
Right.
black side or side black or whatever they called it. Um, Which
But that's
incidentally,
because
Apple doesn't care about because Apple just gives it straight out to you and just says, listen how you ever want to listen to it. Matter of fact, it might be better for you to shuffle it, but that's another story for a different day. By the way, we should have a segment on our show called Albums You Should Be Shuffling. So that's a whole different thing. Yeah,
right.
whole different thing. She watched Planet Zero. She watched
Professor
Channel Zero.
Griff had something to do with this record. He had
Professor
something to do
who?
with the writing of this record.
Professor
And
Professor who?
the comedy between the Professor Griff and Flavor Flav, we know that they hated each other.
Right,
Okay.
Professor Griff, who was part of the S1Ws and the Fruit of Islam, but not really
Right.
part of the Fruit of Islam.
Right.
But
not really-
I'd like to get on stage, and he's just doing the.
he has everybody walking in unison and all that shit.
Yeah, but
he
but
was
he only-
also
But he only had two guys walking in unison.
yeah. Well,
Right.
yeah. Well,
That listen. That part in Malcolm X, where there's a gaggle of niggas. Right.
Right.
That's what you
A
call
gaggle.
a
Okay.
group of black people. A gaggle of niggas, right?
That's so disturbing in so many ways. But go ahead. Did I knock you off your game, man? Come on.
That's hysterical.
I know it is. You're right.
Excuse me. It's that what's impressive is when Malcolm X does a thing.
Right, and they all stop. Right.
Right.
Mhm.
That's cool. Professor Griff on stage with two other guys doing paramilitary things that just walk in a circle, not so much.
Okay, but I will say this. Professor Griff told this very crazy story about his time with Flavor Flav.
Right.
And he was complaining because Griff was also he was the manager. So he was like the tour manager,
I did
making
not know
sure
that.
Yes, he was the tour manager. So he had to make sure everybody was, on time and all this stuff. And he said one of his problems with Flavor Flav is that for years, literally years, he never had any luggage. He would bring everything for when they would go on tour in plastic bags. Just that he would put stuff in plastic bags and just bring it onto the bus, onto the plane, and all this, and stuff it in other people's suitcases.
So somehow people will have a problem with my gaggle of niggas comment, but not that horribly real story, because everybody who I know has moved apartments by using hefty black garbage bags.
But do you really go on tour? Do you go on tour with bags, with garbage bags? So-
Prince, I think you're kind of pretentious there.
Maybe so.
I
But
think- right.
Professor Griff was very upset about this.
Right.
Until he snapped, and he actually had a fight and beat up Flavor Flav. But this is all this I'm getting from Flavor Flav's book, by the way. Flavor Flav wrote a book. I'm probably one of the only 3 people to read it.
Yeah,
but
you, Chuck, and Bridget Nielsen.
right. Good old Bridget. Oh man.
Man.
But
yeah, I can't wait for people to just start Googling all of these references.
Exactly.
Right? Because they're going to laugh as much as we laugh. So,
right.
There you go.
Right. So Flavor Flav decided that he was going to kill Professor Griff because he was over Professor Griff, talking shit about him, and Professor Griff punched him and broke his clock and hurt his ribs and all this. So he went to the studio with the plan of, shooting Professor Griff, but he forgot that there was security, and they patted him down and took his gun as he was walking in, and that was the end of his whole plan to kill Professor
There
Griff.
you go. And so the line, and to my rescue, the S1Ws.
Right.
That's
And
where that
Flavor
was
Flav
born.
Went on to do TV shows and all this.
I remember Professor Griff, again, and we can have incredible conversations about Chuck D and the genius of Chuck D and the genius of commercialism. Um, you know, Professor Griff, who had his album, I remember he had a great single. Um, Professor Griff ended up saying some
Racist.
pretty racist and pretty racist, homophobic, some anti-Semitic,
Yeah.
misogynistic kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And
He got kicked out the group. They
right, and
kicked him out.
Chuck D kicked him out the group.
Right. As well, he should have. Because
Okay,
it was a bit much.
okay, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
It was a bit much.
yeah. It don't fuck with that paper.
Right. Right. Yeah. I have a band. I have a whole band and a whole bunch of people to support. I can't let you fuck my shit up. You're right. You gotta respect. You gotta respect.
Right.
Uh,
And
you
by
know,
the way, I Johnny Gill the brand, right? By the way, I'm using Johnny Gill as a verb and an adjective. When someone Johnny Gills something, that means that they own everything. So they're
I, I mean, I think some of the brilliance that people don't realize about Chuck D was that he was able. I will use your words. He was able to take black nationalism and market it to the masses in a way that was easily digestible. He was able to get white kids all across the country wearing Public Enemy shirts. One of the biggest movies of all time, Terminator 2, the kid is wearing a Public Enemy shirt the whole fucking movie. And though what he was able
listen,
to do it was pretty
Captain
iconic.
Marvel, she's wearing a Nine Inch Nails, shirt. So I mean, come on.
Well, when we discuss Nine Inch Nails and the fact he only knows 3 melodies and has only written actually 3 songs, we can talk about that when we get to the 2000s. But
I'm
until
gonna leave
then,
that alone. I'm gonna leave the god that is Trent Reznor alone, and I'm gonna say I think it's capitalism at its. I think it's capitalism at its best. I think it's misplaced, and I think one of the things that's interesting about Public Enemy is that they've tried hard, but it was always misplaced. It was misplaced. If you go back, go look at the Fight the Power music video, and Al Sharpton is in the Fight the Power music video. And not only is Al Sharpton, Tawana Brawley is in the
because Public Enemy was New York, dude. Because they were New York,
but
and
Tawana Brawley did
right.
as much to set back, right? As much to set back the notion that black people, bad things were happening to African Americans, by in the hands of cops. She set that back, and Al
Well,
Sharpton
that's true,
was
but
right
you
there.
can't. But you cannot be upset with because at this time when they did this, this was before everyone knew what
But then
knew
accept
what was
that,
going on
accept
with
that
it.
accept that it's capitalism. I mean, accept the fact that no one knows what happened. Well, somebody knows what happened with Jussie Smollett, right?
Can I bring the Kardashians into this conversation?
You cannot bring the Kardashians in to this conversation. You shall not talk bad about the Kardashians. But let's talk bad about the Kardashians. Go ahead.
Okay, so a couple of months ago, one of the friends of the Kardashians had sex with one of the Kardashians' boyfriends.
Yeah, this was a couple of weeks ago. This was Jordan. I can't remember her last
Yeah,
name.
Jordan, whatever her name was, and all this.
Right.
And what the Smith family decided to do. This was
Will
Jada.
and Jada. Yes. the
Yeah,
Smith
Will
family.
and Jada
Right. Just gotta,
decided.
Listen, got to make sure that the audience is caught up. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, they decided to give this girl a platform to give out her side of the story and to show some support for her against the big Kardashian conglomerate that was basically trying to destroy her. And I look at Public Enemy embracing Tawana Brawley and all the noise around her. Let us protect our own in this situation. And, yeah, she may have done some fucked up shit, but she's still our own. So let us, this is what we do. We're going to, we're going to we're gonna protect her. That's all. That's all
you,
they were
you,
doing.
you,
I
you,
don't see
you,
what they
you
were
do
doing is
realize that Empire's last season is
right.
the next season of Empire will be its last season, right?
Yes,
And I'm not going to
it
say
should have
it's
ended 4 seasons ago,
well.
but that's a whole
Listen.
nother
That
story.
that may be how you feel, right? Because you like power.
50, man, 50. Gotta
How's
love
that?
50.
How's that repetitive plot working out for you?
I have nothing bad to say about Power or 50 Cent.
How many
I
times
am
you?
leaving all
How many?
that
Ti-
to.
how many? Right? How many times are you gonna say just kill the white boy, or just kill Ghost? How many times are you gonna say that to the damn TV screen? Right? I tell you what. Right? Tommy Kills Ghost season 2. No reason to have, right? It's like the perfect ending when they blew up the town on Little House on the Prairie, right? It's nice and clean, right? So okay, let's not give any more spoiler alerts
Right?
for
Yeah,
for,
yeah.
for
You should
Power.
do a spoiler alert for
Um,
that.
let's move on to I think the two songs that are, if you listen to them, you have to listen to them together first of all, because they run
Okay.
right into each other, right? And
Yeah,
and,
that's
and,
true.
and, and it's consistent. And again, we talk about video being so incredibly important in the '80s. The
Right.
video for Night of Living Bassheads moving into Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos, which is amazing.
Yeah.
First of all, amazing titles, right? Second of all, amazing visuals, and this is where Chuck D, I think, is showing what we love about hip hop so much: the storytelling, right?
Yeah.
Everything from the if I was in New York during the crack epidemic during the '80s, and it was really a zombified. Literally, I remember getting home one night after all the stores were closed on 40th Avenue in Queensbridge, and I remember walking. I was walking down from another neighborhood, and I looked down just this kind of empty street, and there were these bass heads, crack cocaine, free bass heads that were wandering the streets, and not just wandering the streets like sitting on a bench on the sidewalk, literally walking in the middle of the street,
Like Living Dead.
like the
Right.
Living Dead. And so that visual was really important to me, and that song was so incredibly important because you have to go back to we hadn't I believe we were right on, if we hadn't gotten it, we were right on the cusp of New Jack City, right? We were still very much in the Supreme and Alpo and all of those guys that had moved their businesses over to crack from heroin and
Right.
stuff like cocaine, and so we the and white people who are listening to the show think about what's happening in the Midwest with OxyContin and fentanyl and everything else like that. That's what crack was like for black people in the '80s, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think it was an incredibly powerful song, and to me, this is one of the two songs, right? And I misspoke earlier. I was talking about Yo Bum Rush the Show, and that was the single. Rebel Without a Pause comes back on this album, and it has that power. But and I said it was on a different album, so I'm mistaken there. But so this is one of the three songs. This song made whenever with hip hop, and in all seriousness, in hip hop, whenever you tell a story, I think Ice Cube said that hip hop is just the herald for the streets. It's the CNN for the streets. That's what hip hop is. And if you listen closely to hip hop, a great storyteller in hip hop, the KRS Ones, the Biggies, even the Tupacs, are even the Jay Z's and the Rakims are going to tell a
The
story.
Kendrick Lamar's.
Right? Yeah, the Kendricks, the Nas's. They're going to tell, not the J Cole's though. Oof. Okay.
J. Cole is so underrated, but that's a whole nother story.
That's a whole right. I'm not even going there. Right. Tell these stories that make them the Walter Cronkite, Walter Cronkite.
CNN.
Right. That make him the CNN. Well, nobody watches CNN. Right. That
Right,
make
but
him the Rachel Maddows of the of the very illustrative, and Night of the Living Baseheads is a perfect example of that.
and it also shows how Chuck D was, how you say this album was, you like to use the term black nationalism, but basically, just like Public Enemy's album, they were just saying what was going on the streets. Chuck D was basically doing this exact same thing before them, you know.
Right. Right.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, so I think his credit is deserved, and it was, he's for the innovator and being ahead of his time that they were.
Now,
Right.
this brings us into the next track, which is I think a song that um, is so powerfully told, is so poignant to even those of us that haven't been incarcerated. Um,
Which one
that
is
is
it?
so relevant
Oh,
now.
okay, I know what you're saying.
Um, Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos is a
Yes.
track that will make you get up. Has a black man that will make you get up and want to do something.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It is heroic in the rescue by the S1Ws.
Mm-hmm.
It is um, it is it is a storytelling. It is dramatic. In Chuck D gets away at the end of the
Right.
story. It breaks all the rules in that. Um, it is um, very personal. One, anytime a letter comes from the government,
I got a letter from the government. Right.
right? Anytime you open that letter, one of the things that
Right.
you do say, they were suckers. They suckers.
Right.
You know, it doesn't rhyme, but it is that poignant as the 99 Problems, but a bitch ain't one,
Mm.
right? It is that poignant as anything that Jay Z's ever done or Nas has ever done, and and anyone has ever written. That line, I got a letter from the government the other day. I opened and read it
Mm.
and said they were suckers. Doesn't rhyme, doesn't
Right.
necessarily have a cadence, but it is something that everybody's lived, and I think great music brings you back to that place. Black
I would
Steel
agree
in
with
the
that.
Hour of Chaos is the song that makes this album. It is back in the 80s, one of the things that you had was you found music that made you buy an entire album.
Right.
This
Right.
was the song that you bought the album for. And excuse me, it is track 12, buried deep,
Sequence time. Okay.
buried
Right.
deep.
Yes. Very deep in the mix. Very deep in the album.
But
Right.
I remember when I had this tape,
Hmm.
listening to this tape, listening to this cassette for Night of the Living Baseheads into Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos.
Mm.
Nothing was important before, and very little was important after.
The thing that made the this band so important and is the fact that they didn't give a fuck, or at least they gave the impression that they did not give a fuck
Or
about.
or their audience was too immature to realize that the whole thing was wrapped up in commercialism.
Uh, well,
Okay. All right.
uh,
All right. All right. All right.
if you look throughout the band's history, you know they they wrote a song about for Martin Luther King's birthday where they're literally killing white governors in the music video. Come on, they did not give a
So
fuck. The
one of the
video
things
was
that I think
banned.
we should probably recognize is that U2 is a band, the Stones is a band,
Right.
Duran Duran is a band, hell, even Depeche Mode is a band. Public Enemy is a rap group. You probably should know the difference.
Public Enemy is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Okay, they are you can call them a band.
So is
Well,
Gary Glitter.
no, Gary
Da-na-na-na-na.
Glitter was a
Hey.
drummer
Da-na-na-na.
from, if
And by
my
the way,
history serves me
and
right.
they gave him his award after they went to Thailand and found him with those 10
Right,
7 year old
Taiwanese chicks.
boys. Okay,
Right,
all right.
13-year-old girls.
Yeah,
Right.
no, little boys. I think they were.
Uh,
Yeah. Okay. Well, allegedly. Uh,
yeah, allegedly.
allegedly.
Yeah, thanks for
Let's.
throwing that in.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Um. Either
Are
way.
we where are we at
All right. So let's talk
on
about
this album?
Security of the First World. Again, um, filler from the Shockley
Right,
brothers, and I think
right.
that,
Second.
but I think it's really good, right? It's kind of like when I watch when I watch midget porn amputee threesomes, right? Don't judge me, right?
Chuck, see, they made
It's when I
a
watch
cons-
that type of porn, and then I look at YouTube videos of kittens. It's a wash.
they made a concerted effort to give everybody a chance to show what they could do without any,
Again
without
and
any
again
noise.
and
Everybody,
again
right?
and
They did the
again
same thing
and
on the
again.
other side,
Yeah, okay.
on side one. You
Again,
know,
right?
here's your minute and a half
Right,
to
right.
do
Because I
what
gotta
you
have 15 songs, but I gotta
do.
have 15. Okay, let's talk about Rebel Without a Pause. Amazing
Another
song.
classic.
Amazing song.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Amazing song. Um, you know, James Brown got to finally get his hair done again after the residuals
Right.
from
Funky drummer.
from,
Right.
from most of that. Um, but I think what was interesting is that the way that even the sampling, and the fact that so much of it was actually played, that it wasn't sampled, so much of it was played, I think is something to be said.
Okay. I
So
didn't.
Rebel Without a Cause Without a Pause is a great way to wind an album down.
Mhm.
And if anything, and then we get into the Prophets of Rage, which ends on a weird sample, right? Well, when the people say, right, you're quite hostile, right? Um,
Right.
it is. I don't know if it is. Well, actually, Party for Your Right to Fight. I don't know what that is, but when I hear Prophets of Rage, it starts to feel like at this point, um, Public Enemy is like, okay, I've given you everything I can get.
Right. Well, I mean, one thing you like I said it kind of in the beginning. You can't look at this as a collection of singles. This was basically an introduction, a reintroduction of the band to, and I use the word band loosely, but a reintroduction of the band to the masses. I mean, if you notice, in every song, you will hear Public Enemy number one. You hear that on every fucking track.
I go back into
you
the commercialism of it, right?
exactly.
Right,
It's
right.
like
But
yeah, it
the
worked.
album is fatiguing.
Okay,
It's
well,
tiring.
because
I mean, you talk to me about Trent Reznor and his three chords.
right.
You know,
Well,
there's only so many whistles and bells and distorted beats and
but one of the
samples
reasons
of
why
public speeches that I can
But
take.
one of the reasons why this album is so long and sounds so out of control is because it was their first time doing it. This was their first time getting this sound together. They were excited about it. They just putting it together. I mean, come on, they're giving the guys they're giving them extra fucking Mentos in the 1980s. What the fuck?
So
they
this
were, yeah.
yeah.
By the
so,
next
so on
album,
that
they were
note,
able to tighten everything up.
I think that's important, and I'm a studio guy, right? So I think it's really important to understand that, in looking at the details on this album is made for under 30 grand, which is ridiculously small. And the reason that this album is made under 30 grand is because this started to become the era of a bunch of guys working in a small bedroom, perfecting everything and just going in and laying the vocals down. So now you have less than 30 days, and now you have albums. So this is the era of the um, I have to craft it and then bring it in. This is really and this and Teddy Riley. See how I
Hmm.
work Teddy Riley into all the
Of
conversations.
course. Well, this is kind of a new Jack Swing
Yeah, this
kind
is the
of
whole
deal.
right
Yeah.
because the Shockley brothers would go in and actually do Aaron Hall's first album, right?
Right. That's right.
Which was really interesting with "Don't Be Afraid" and everything, and it was taking this organized confusion into R&B, which worked well, and I think the problem was more in Aaron Hall and what Aaron Hall could really do and what he couldn't do. Um, and but but this was an album that was created over a long period of time and many nights and crafting and with a surgeon's instrument going in and tooling and what is interesting about this album is that this becomes the gold standard of what record labels expected you to do in terms of prepping for your album before you came in,
Hmm.
right? Because
Okay. Yeah.
from this point on, um, this is when you have the Pete Rock, CL Smooth, and all those guys like that you weren't just recording and doing all this stuff um, in,
Yeah.
in
We're not wasting a bunch of hours. You're not wasting a bunch of hours in the studio.
exactly.
Uh, yeah, trying to come up with shit.
Exactly, and so now, from a hip hop perspective, especially in New York City at that time, anybody could get a deal, and it's not that it's because hip hop was so potent and everything. Anybody can get a deal because to record a rock band and do everything for a rock band, I'm talking about a $300,000 budget. I can get
Right.
10 hip hop bands for that, and I only need one of them to stick,
Right.
and
Right. Hmm.
that was insane at the time. So definitely give Enemy that. Again, my last kind of statement on It Takes a Nation is, um, I like the way that the album has in revisionist history. The album is this seminal piece of work and so incredibly important and we can
That's right.
you know
Yes, I preach that to everybody I see.
because we can talk about Linkin Park and we can talk about Fred Durst and we can talk about Korn and we can talk about all those guys. But the fact of the matter is when this album came out, we weren't even thinking in that way. We weren't
Exactly.
thinking about the Public Enemy logo, and we weren't thinking about
Exactly.
Terminator 2. We weren't thinking about any of that stuff. But what Chuck D was thinking about was, um, the importance of marketing, the importance of commercialism, the importance of brand, right? And
Right.
and and this is what I
Hmm.
think Chuck did incredibly well. He understood the brand. He understood the what would happen if he understood creating multiple brands. So if you got sick of the main brand, you had Flavor Flav,
Right.
right? And he understood
Right.
how much of a leash to keep that on.
Hmm.
Although Flavor Flav, they all went to college together. Flavor Flav is incredibly smart and incredibly gifted, incredibly talented, right? But I think it's really interesting in how so much of this, like the Shockley beats, are contrived. And so much of the image and so much of the placement, so much of the narrative is contrived. And I think one of the things that's interesting. I don't think that I don't think that I don't think that we talk about a lot how um, albums from the '80s, which the artists will say is kind of just thrown to is kind of very contrived, like everything that U2 did was very contrived and very focused. And then when you talk to U2, they go, "We were just a bunch of lads, and we were just trying to sing about like the heroes we had, and we saw what was happening in Belfast at the time, and everything else like that." This is just the
I
album.
like you too, but go
Right, right,
ahead.
right. No, I love U2, but this is the exact opposite, right? This is an album that, in revisionist history, we kind of said just came together at the right time, but in fact was incredibly contrived.
I think one thing that we kind of touched on but didn't really talk about is that one of the reasons that Public Enemy became so important and big was because of white people.
Right.
White people really made Public Enemy
Yeah,
big.
but that was revisionist. That's
Uh,
revisionist. That's
you think
revisionist.
so?
Yeah, absolutely. Because nobody was, you know, the interesting thing is that it takes a nation of millions to hold us back. Went gold the first
Right.
week, right?
Yeah.
But the reason why it went gold is because all of those reviews in the Village Voice and the Rolling Stones and in white
Hmm.
media painted these guys to be, well, no, no, no. This is a different type of rap music, a different type of hip hop. This is the thoughtful type, right? This is the time, And again, one of the interesting things is in doing the research for this album, what I found myself kept continuing to be drawn back to is, so this was recorded in 1987. What was happening in 1987?
Exactly.
Right, and
Yeah.
and and
Here's
1987
why
was
I'm sorry.
incredibly
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Let me let you finish your thought.
1987 was incredibly transformative in terms of, we hadn't gotten Clinton yet. He was Governor Clinton, right? So we were still under the spell of Ronald Reagan. We were still under the spell of crack. And that's why I brought up Bernard Getz, and
Hmm.
people
The
should
subway
understand.
shooting and all that, right?
Right, people should understand how weird that whole thing was, and how just weird the idea of justice and how warped justice can be, to really kind of understand that. Also understanding the 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 knowing what we know now about terrorism and Lockerbie and everything else like that. And by the way, if you believe that we should not have done things in Iraq and we shouldn't be doing things in Iran, I tell you to go back to 1987 and look at some of the things that were being done, and you'll understand some of those things. But
Well, I think we also
we,
need to look at
yeah,
when we're looking at this album is also look at what was going on musically at this time as to why Public Enemy got was so big right then, even from a musical point of view.
fair enough,
There
right?
were no real rebels out there. There
That's
were
right.
no real bands that did not give a fuck out there. Everything when you talk about contrived, I mean,
That's
you
fair
know,
enough.
yeah,
Everything. It's
yeah,
interesting that you say that, right? Because
right.
the end of the '80s for me were marked by, in 1987, it was Wang Chung. Everybody have fun tonight. That was
Right.
the
Yeah.
end, right? And then I was like, oh, I'm not listening to white music no more. I'm listening to black music after that. And so you're absolutely right, right?
Right.
Because black music had to come in on an R&B feel,
Hmm.
because new wave and all of the beautiness we got from overseas and everything else like that, it just wasn't there. We hadn't seen Guns N' Roses yet. We hadn't seen what emerged from the post. So yes, Public Enemy ended up being the rock band
Exactly.
as well as the hip hop band that we
Right.
needed in '87 and '88. And the
Right.
Shockleys, I think, filled that very
Yeah.
very very well. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
okay, it takes a nation of millions to hold us down. Thumbs up. I'm actually going to give this one a thumbs up
Yes,
as
of
well,
course.
right? I'm going to give
Right.
this one a thumbs up as well because, um, and you and I talk about this, and it, despite all of my swipes and stabs and presenting a contrarian opinion, Public Enemy is incredibly important. And it's
Yes, of
incredibly
course.
important to getting just I remember what Public Enemy meant to me. Public Enemy meant that I should probably pay more attention to the Nation of Islam. That I should probably understand the role that the Honorable Louis Farrakhan plays in society and still plays.
Hmm.
And what Malcolm
Except
X
on
meant to
Twitter
that.
and Facebook.
Right,
But
right, right.
right.
I'm gonna leave that alone. And how much the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was absolutely right in a lot of what he was saying, and what we call black nationalism. Without Public
Mm.
Enemy, there's no Obama. Without Public
Right.
Enemy,
Yeah. That's
there's
yeah.
no
I would agree with that.
yeah. Without
Right.
Public Enemy, there's no Breakfast Club, the number one radio
Mhm.
show in the world right now. Without
Right.
Public Enemy, there's no Camilla and Corey and Stacey Adams and all of these folks that feel so empowered to do that. Spike Lee doesn't have the success with do the right thing without fight the
Right.
power. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's one of those things. So Chuck remains an incredibly
Iconic.
poignant
Yeah.
voice. Yes,
Yes. He's an
and just a
iconic
voice.
voice in a
And
lot of
and
ways. Right.
and I would even argue to say, while Biggie Smalls represents the um, the voice, and Jigga represents the dream and the ambition, and Tupac represents the angst. It's really Chuck D's voice that you hear when you think black hip hop.
Yeah.
So,
Well said.
yeah, that's
Well
it.
said, man.
Yeah,
About time.
right. It took a whole hour and 30 minutes.
Right, for you to
Right.
come up with something
You,
good
you know
to
the
say.
the
All right.
horrible part is that most people have tuned out at this part of the podcast, and
Right, but still.
which is why any podcast that we do after this is all going to be downhill because nobody's going to listen because they're so pissed off at that black guy in the red shirt and what the fuck he had to say about
Yeah, him and his
black
gaggle
women
of niggas.
and a
Right.
gaggle of niggas. By the way, because we have to have conversations about what we call these podcasts, right? And this
Right.
probably would be entitled this is horrible.
Gaggle of niggas.
Public Enemy.
Ah.
Public Enemy. It takes a nation of millions to hold us back. Quotes gaggle of niggas, right? Which is right. Which is just right. Which will get that brand new verified Twitter and YouTube status that we get from the first
Right.
five
Yeah,
of these.
we
We'll get
eliminated
that
it.
totally taken away.
Yeah.
That's good.
Exactly.
So, as one of the producers of this podcast, Prince, I implore you to put this on as one of the last ones that we do.
Yes.
And
Don't worry.
be
We
smart
edit
about
it and we'll take bits and take some good bits. It'll be
Listen,
good.
as always, if you agree with what we say, or you disagree with what we say, or you find us entertaining and you want to hear more, we're going to ask that you subscribe. Subscribe wherever you get podcasts at. Subscribe on Apple Music, right? Subscribe on Spotify, Pandora, anybody that's going to be sponsoring the show, and then we'll tell everybody
Right.
else, fuck you, right? Listen on the app and listen when you can, but give us feedback because that lets us know you're alive. Content creators need to be all about data collection, right? So the more information, we're not asking you to pay for anything, but we are asking for a little information about yourself. Tell us where you live. Even just give us a zip code. Give us your name and your address and put your daddy's pink slip in the. No, don't do that, right? That's that goon shit, right? No,
Right.
no. But data keeps us running, and we believe that many of you maybe have never heard of some of these albums, but have lived through that same passion that we have for the '80s. So, the Adult Education Podcast finishes another podcast, and Prince, thank you as always.
Yeah, dude. You were okay today. Not not your best work, but it was okay.
I gaggle and niggas. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I know. Gaggle of niggas, dude.
All right.
Ugh.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Take care. All right, there you go, Prince. Can we get away with the gaggle of niggas?
Gaggle of niggas, dude. I couldn't believe you said that. I was gonna let it go, but I just couldn't. Oh, no. Come on, man.
It's not often that I say something that just cracks me the fuck up. Right? And because the visuals of a whole
Right.
bunch of black guys just walking around is
Like
is-
fucking ducks. Right. Ugh.
I think that's apologies for the dark out. I forgot to get my my Public Enemy dolls, and don't ask why I have Public Enemy dolls.
But, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. We didn't go into that.
All right, but
How long have you had those?
I've had Public Enemy dolls for a long time.
Mm.
I think the interesting thing about the Public Enemy dolls is that you see the velour. It's
Ah, I
actually
see
velour.
that. Right.
It's actually velour.
Actual
So
velour.
they're incredibly detailed. It I collect all things like black Americana,
Yeah.
right? So black. Well, hold on,
Not no people eating watermelons
hold,
though.
hold on, hold
Oh
on.
my. Oh.
This will be, and you can take this and you can keep this, but this
Oh my lord.
right.
Oh my lord.
So this is my dancing nigger stick.
You poor man.
So little kids used to play with this. Little white kids used to play with this, right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's still lead paint, so I can't. I got to keep it away, right? I got to keep
Right.
it in the
Right.
corner.
Jesus.
There you go. How's that? Look at that. Right. That's just.
Pathetic. Oh,
That's. So, the story goes is that.
nothing like that American racism. Jeez.
Jeez, right? So, the story goes is that what used to happen is you can just tell a nigga to dance and entertain you
Mm-hmm.
at any time. But even the niggas had to go to sleep.
Right.
So the little boys and girls had one of these things, and when someone played piano, they would make them dance like this.
Oh my. Oh, ain't
Right.
America grand? Oh boy.
So, um, I collect these things.
That makes one of us. Okay.
So, if I collected Nazi memorabilia,
Mm-hmm.
how much would I have to spend for Nazi memorabilia?
Oh, quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Thousands of dollars,
A
minimum.
lot.
A lot.
To quote
Right.
21 Savage.
Right.
A lot.
A lot. How much do I have to spend for what is called Black Americana? They call it Black Americana. That's a thing.
I have no. I've never priced it. I would have no idea. It's probably very cheap
Pennies on the dollar.
because nobody wants it. Nobody can.
No.
You can't have that in your house.
No, the problem.
A
problem.
white person can't have it in their house. I should say.
I'm going to tell you why it's so cheap. Because they still make it.
Really.
Yeah. So I'd love to tell you, Prince, that this is an authentic 1956 dancing minstrel,
Yeah.
but it isn't. This I bought in 2003, and it was brand new, made authentically. Someone went and had to find paint with lead in it to do that. So they still make it. And I keep it as a reminder that this stuff is new and this is how they see us.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I look at a lot of the artists that are out, this is what they're doing.
Ouch. Ugh.
The next podcast, I will show you my Jolly Nigger Bank where I put a penny in his hand and he goes up and his eyes close. I have that over there. I'll make sure I have that down for the next podcast.
What's going to be? What are we doing next? Anyway, what's the next podcast?
Wow, you don't even want to comment on my
I
black.
don't even want to. I don't even.
No. Think about it this way.
I can't get into that.
We could actually do an entire show where Lisa comes into my room and she talks about all of the Black Americana and see how uncomfortable it actually makes her.
I don't think she would be uncomfortable at all.
No, she's uncomfortable.
Oh, really?
When I mean she's uncomfortable, she's like, "Why do you even have this shit?" She's as pissed off as I would expect you to be. Right? That's how I know Lisa ain't what she tries to say she is, right? But,
Mm-hmm.
so there you go.
Yeah.
Now, that's why I love her to death, because if she's not a blinding conservative racist, if she's lying so heavily about that, then she's probably lying about half the other stuff that I dislike about her. So that's why I love her so much. So there you go.
Right.
Um,
So what do you want to do next? Any
Duran
idea?
Duran Rio.
Oh yeah, Rio. Yeah.
So we're
About
doing
time we
Rio.
get to that.
Great album.
Okay.
Great album. So I thought that this was good. I finally an album where I'm just taking you heads on and breaking some lot of eggs.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was all right. You know.
I think I think that's necessary. I thought you would have fought back a little bit more on the outrage of I was waiting to say, dude, don't you see your skin color or something like that, but you didn't do any of that.
No. No, there was I had some other Chuck D stories, but they didn't feel like they fit. So